We've mentioned that the goal of our project is to see if there's a correlation between various environmental factors and genes and the likelihood of someone becoming a regular smoker. So in order to be able to do this, it'll first help to know how smoking affects the body. And that's because if you know which specific parts of the body that smoking affects, then you can identify which genes smoking might affect, right? Because genes encode for all the different parts of the body. And if you can identify genes that might have a role in affecting smoking behavior, then you can then test those genes to see if there is indeed a correlation between those genes and, again, the likelihood of becoming a smoker. So we're going to do that here. We're going to show exactly how smoking affects the body. And in particular, the portion of the body that we're going to key in on is the brain, because it's the brain that controls addictive behaviors like smoking. All right, so to see how smoking affects the brain, it'll first help to know that different areas of the brain can communicate with one another. And so to see how that happens, what we'll do is we'll take a look at the structure of just one single nerve cell that makes up the brain. Right? So if you consider a single nerve cell or a single neuron, it looks something like this. So here is the body of the nerve cell, and this green splotch represents the nucleus of the nerve cell. Notice that the body of a nerve cell has all of these little extensions on it called dendrites. And the job of the dendrites is that it receives signals, for example, from other nerve cells. One of the things that a nerve cell can do after it receives a signal is to turn around and send out another signal to either another nerve cell or a muscle cell. And so in order for this nerve cell then to send out a signal, what occurs is that it transmits its message along this really long extension called an axon. Right? So the axon, its function is to transmit whatever signal the cell is going to want to transmit. At the end of the axon are these smaller extensions. So that's just called, it's called the end of the axon, and the technical term for that is the axon terminal. And it's at the axon terminal that the chemical signal ends up leaving the nerve cell. Right? And so the chemical signals that are used by our nerve cells, represented by these yellow things, are called neurotransmitters. Right? So again, these are the chemical signals that nerve cells use to talk with one another. These neurotransmitters that are released, actually they can either talk to nerve cells or other types of cells too. So they could either communicate with a muscle cell, causing it to contract, or like we mentioned, neurotransmitters can talk to other nerve cells to cause this nerve cell then to do something. And so just another term that'll help to know is this term synapse. And when you're talking about a synapse, basically all that is the space between one nerve cell's axon terminal and another nerve cell's dendrite. Right? So it's the space between the transmitting neuron and the receiving neuron. What that neurotransmitter does after it's released is that if it's talking to a nerve cell, the way that it affects that nerve cell is that it again binds to the dendrites of that nerve cell, which will ultimately then cause this nerve cell to do something. After that neurotransmitter has done its job, then it'll help to then have some way of getting rid of those neurotransmitters, because it's kind of not a good thing to always have all of your muscles and all of your nerve cells stimulated all the time. And so there's two general ways that neurotransmitters can be eliminated after they've already performed their job. Right? So one way of getting rid of a neurotransmitter, so how are neurotransmitters removed from the synapse? One way is that they're actually reabsorbed by the neuron that released them. Kind of like this. Right? So if we're going to make a list, how are neurotransmitters removed after they've already done their job? One way of doing that is they can be reabsorbed by the sending neuron. Another way to get rid of neurotransmitters after they've already done their job is this. It turns out that this neuron, the one that is receiving the message from the neurotransmitter, is capable of producing enzymes that can break down those neurotransmitters after they've already performed their function. So we'll list that as the second way that neurotransmitters can be gotten rid of. They can be broken down by enzymes found in the dendrites of the receiving neuron. All right. So that's basically what a nerve cell looks like, and that's basically what it does. What we'll do is we'll focus in on one specific type of neurotransmitter that plays a big role in smoking behaviors. Right? And so the name of that neurotransmitter that we're going to focus on, it's called dopamine. And it turns out that the thing that kind of triggers the release of dopamine from a nerve cell is another type of chemical signal called acetylcholine. So if the body is making acetylcholine, that will bind to certain types of nerve cells to cause them then to release a specific type of neurotransmitter called dopamine. And dopamine has several effects on the body. So for example, dopamine plays a role in voluntary movement. It plays a role in someone being able to go to sleep. It plays a role in someone being, able to feel motivated to do something. And dopamine also plays a role in someone's ability to be able to experience pain or pleasure. And so if you're wondering, well, what's the reason why someone would release dopamine? So kind of the natural purpose of having dopamine, one of them, is that it reinforces essential behaviors. So for example, eating, that's an essential behavior because if we didn't eat, then we'd eventually die. And so to kind of encourage us to do something important like eat, whenever we eat, that stimulates dopamine release. So it kind of reinforces this worthwhile essential activity, eating. Another example of an activity that dopamine reinforces is sex. Right? Because sex is important because it ensures that our genes live on in the form of our offspring. And so to encourage this essential behavior, which will cause our genes to not die off, sex causes the release of dopamine in order to reinforce that essential behavior. And so it turns out that dopamine, it's not required all the time. So there's some instances when the body needs it, there's some when the body doesn't. And so to see how the levels of dopamine are increased or decreased, how about if we do this? We'll focus in on this particular area right here. So this we'll focus in on the synapse between this axon terminal and the dendrite to see how the levels of dopamine can be increased or decreased. Right, so we'll blow up that area.